This is the Million Ways to Millions podcast, where we discover if building wealth is still possible today. Join me, Micah Hayworth, as I dive deep with the everyday success stories of those who built wealth in a variety of ways. Whether you're seeking actionable advice, inspiration, or a roadmap to financial freedom, this podcast offers insights from those who have achieved it before. Now for the episode. Anthony, thank you for joining us on the Million Ways to Million podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I love on the show where we're kind of talking about the stories of different people who have built wealth in different ways. And I love listening to your story about the various different ways you've been able to build wealth. And you've kind of like tapped into a lot of different wealth building tools, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I know you've done Airbnbs. You have your hand in a couple small motels. Most recently, like a smoke shop and a liquor store, which is really, really cool. And then starting it all off with house flipping. I'd love to kind of hear about how you first got into the idea of buying real estate and flipping houses, and what led to that change in mindset.
So, some people get into real estate by intention.
Yeah.
I got into it by accident, but with intention later on in life. So I got into it when I was younger because I didn't want to rent. I was out of high school. I didn't want to live at home anymore. I wanted to do something. So I ended up finding a house and buying it with a friend of mine. So I was on commission. I was making great money as an automotive painter. And my other buddy had a very steady job since he was 16 years old. So with my income and his credit, to qualify for a mortgage, you have to have 2-year history on commission painting. Well, I only was there for not even a year. So I need somebody else's credit, and I had a good income coming in. So we ended up purchasing a house together. When I was 19 years old, and I still own that house today. So, but what had happened was my roommate that we bought the house together, he wanted to jump shifts. He didn't want to be a mechanic anymore. He wanted to get in the lineman field, the electrical lineman. But what was really booming at that time was the oil fields in North Dakota. So to get a lot of hours in, he went and worked up there for 70, 80 hours a week, and he ended up just staying up there. So he's like, well, I don't really want to pay for a house I'm not living in anymore. So I ended up buying them out. And this wasn't the greatest time. We bought that house in 2006. So if you didn't know what happened in 2007, 8, 9. So
rough time for real estate.
Yeah, it was a rough time. And everybody's like, oh, you should let the house go. And that's where he kind of was like, well, I'm working up in the oil fields. I don't really want to pay for a house that isn't worth what we paid for it. And I was like, well, I'm not going to let that stop me, or I don't want to foreclose on a house. I don't want to do a short sale or anything when I can afford it. And it's like, well, I didn't want to be house poor, so I could have got a couple more roommates, but I was actually able to rent my house out, and I moved back home for 6 months. And then I ended up finding a house I could rent for a half the price of what I was my mortgage on my house was. So I was able to rent my house out, cover my mortgage payment. Then also I was renting a farmstead, so I had plenty of land and acreage and sheds, and I could store stuff in, and I rented that place for a while, and then I rented out the basement to one of my other best friends. So I was all in. I was $375 a month in mortgage payments or in rent payments, and everything else was covered. And I was 20 years old. And
that's awesome. Being able to kind of like arbitrage a couple little different things.
That's how I got into it by accident.
That's awesome. And so you had your rental. Where was that first rental at?
The first rental
house that you bought.
It was in Hampton, Minnesota. I still have it. Actually, I live in it still now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's funny reason why I do that, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, then I was doing auto body, and then somebody from a church came in. They're like, hey, we have this bus we need off our property. Can you help us with a tow truck company? So I went out there, and I got it running, and I bought the bus for $500.
What are you doing with the bus?
So I just turned all the seats the long way and started a party bus company. So I was like, I was born to be an entrepreneur.
So very, very young.
Yeah.
First house you bought, you partnered with someone else who had the credit and you had the capital, and then ended up stepping out of that so that you can rent that property out for more than what your rent was. But then with the second place you rented, you subleased to someone else.
Yes. And so my all-in cost was $375, and then all of a sudden now I had the land. I could store this party bus, and I turned 21. All my friends are turning 21. So we hired drivers for this, and they would drive us around, and I'd collect $20 a head, and we did really well with it. So it was always a great way for cash and funneling, paying for my vacation. So I was able to make extra money outside of my regular job. And I made a lot of contacts in auto body, and everybody I was building these cars for really made their money and their wealth in real estate. And I said, man, if I could be half as good in real estate as I am in auto body, I no doubt I'd be successful.
Maybe do something.
So
you just kind of took a poll of all these customers, like, hey, this is a really nice car.
yeah,
what do you do again? Oh, real
exactly.
estate. What do you do again? Oh, interesting.
And it was really high dollar cars because I did a lot of fabrication and paint jobs and muscle cars and hot rods, and so it made sense. I was like, well, I think I need to do that because I'm spending a lot of time. I'm making money, but I'm not creating wealth.
Yep. Perfect.
So that's kind of how I got into knowing that I wanted to do real estate. And then I got married in 2012. And then we've heard that fortune builder seminar thing. I learned how to get rich, making or flipping houses without none of your own money. Well, I was like, well, it's the worst case scenario. Let's go check it out. Then, you do the 2-hour thing, then the 3-day seminar, and then you're like, all right, I'm hooked. I'll buy this package. And I got in pretty early with fortune builders, and it was inexpensive in my eyes. I flipped my first house, and we made all our money back and then some. And I was like, well, if we could do this, we can do it again. Do it again. Yeah. So before we even sold our first flip, we bought our second one. Then we bought our third one. And then we sold our first one, made money. Sold our second one, made money. The third one, we ended up tearing down, subdivided the land, and built a new construction house. And I built a side-by-side duplex. I sold this house, carried the equity in, paid down the duplex, and then I was able to refi and then cash out money. So I was into the property for less than $30,000. And I still own that duplex today.
So over what period of time was these first 5, 6 flips?
The first flips, I put under contract in 15, closed in 16, and then I closed the first one. I closed in June. I closed the second one in September, and then I closed the third one in the winter sometime. I can't remember when. Yeah. But it was also a series of probably 9 months on my first 3 flips. But then I kept going and buying more,
getting better and better and faster.
Getting more efficient with everything. And
it's awesome.
While I still had a full-time job, I think we had 8 projects was the most we had going on at once, and it was just where I'm like, I don't need to work full-time anymore. I should focus on this. And so go to my wife. She's like, well, who gets to quit first? I'm like, well, I'm most active in the company, so I should probably quit. So I walked away from my full-time job in 2017. So less than 2 years of getting into the real estate, we were out. However, I can tell you I was much more efficient when I had a job because I didn't have as much time. And now I have all this time, and it's like, I can go do this. I can go look at a property. I can go do this. I can have coffee and everything and network. And, starting out, I should have been a little more efficient with my time. Yeah. So I'd say that's one of my biggest things. Getting more efficient is probably what I'm working on now.
So kind of take you back a little bit. When you're doing your first flip, how did you finance that thing? How did you find it? What were the challenges when you were doing that first one? Because the first one's the hardest one. Because you're just doing it for the first time. Can you dive in a little bit of that?
Yeah. So the first one, I used to attend all the local meetups that were available, and a hard money lending company here in Minnesota, Pine Financial, which I've grown to be great friends with all the employees and owner. And we had been going to their meetings, and they said, we can fund a property 100% of the purchase price, 100% of the rehab, as long as it's under 70% of loan to value. We did find that project. However, we did have a private money lender that was cheaper than what Pine was offering. So what we did is we had Pine fund the purchase, and then we had a private money lender fund the repairs and holding costs and everything. So when we bought it, and I'm glad we used Pine because Sean is a loan officer here, but he's also very knowledgeable in what's needed, what's not needed. So I'm like, I budgeted $1,200 for laundry, so that way I could buy a new washer and dryer. He's like, you don't need to put that in a house. They might be brand specific. You might buy the cheap ones now, and somebody wants to upgrade it. You're just wasting your money. So he went through and kind of told me what we did and didn't need, and helped me out. And there were some things I was going to do myself, and he's like, just hire it so it's done, because the cost of money is a little more expensive than paying a little extra to get it done sooner. So it's just about moving the project along.
And you get some good advice along the way too, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
Even from the get-go, it's not a solo sport.
No, and that's where it's like, and that's where my thing is I learned from a long time ago that someone just hire the badasses, because the people you want might not work out, and you might hire just a one-man job, and it's like, okay, if they're sick, their work's not getting done. Hire the people that know what they're doing, that can get that stuff done, and that might have a team of 2 or 3 in case one's sick or they're out, or if there's an emergency at another one of their job sites, they got to get pulled off yours. So hiring the right people for the job is the right one. So in interviewing, and it's not like going out and getting 3 quotes. It's maybe get 2. If you can get 3, great, but you don't want to waste a bunch of people's time, because if sooner or later, if you start getting a bunch of quotes and you stop using those people and they're not getting the work, they're not going to come bid your jobs anymore. So it's being, conscious of other people's time as well, and knowing who the real players are. And then when you actually find good contractors, don't try to nickel and dime them. Everybody's like, oh, I think, well, I could get this done for cheaper. And it's like, I don't like when people do that to me, and I don't want to do that to people either. I would say pay them what they're worth and make sure you're keeping them busy, because then the prices will come down.
I think that's there's one thing I read right off the bat in Rich Dad Poor Dad, because Robert Kiyosaki talks about in that book where when it comes to the experts, not to nickel and dime and to pay them. Like, hearing about people always trying to negotiate their property management company down a couple percent just to save a couple bucks. But the best people know what the value of their labor is. And also, if you want that great continuous relationship with somebody, I feel like if they feel the best value they give you is some sort of discount, I feel like that relationship is kind of cheapened. Whereas if you show them that, hey, I value the work you do and I'm willing to pay accordingly, I think that definitely will lead to a much better relationship in the long run.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to be standoffish and resent working for you when you've tried to negotiate a deal when they've probably already given you a pretty decent deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if they're more expensive than the next person. But if you can have a long-standing working relationship that is reliable, and you can provide work for them, that's going to be much better off.
Love it.
And so I still have the same crews I've been flipping houses with since 2016.
Awesome.
Now I'm not really flipping houses anymore, but they're always looking for work. So I refer those ones out, and I help them out with other projects along the way as well.
So I'm going to go back a little bit again. So how did you find that first deal?
So I was taught in like my mentorship program was to word of mouth. Find someone that knows a lot of people, or tell everybody what you're doing, so that way everybody knows your name. So a good friend of mine, a neighbor, actually brought me my first 2 deals.
There you
go.
He
actually was the walking mailman in town. So I live in a small town, so he knows what everybody's going through. Not that he has to share any of that, but he knew this family was in need of selling this house because the father had passed away, and there were 6 siblings, all older, and they're like, we don't want this house. We don't know what to do with it. We don't want to list it and have a bunch of people go through all our dad's and mom's stuff in there. So they just want an easy transaction, close on their timeline. So we had to wait through a probate process, and we were able to close as whenever they wanted to. I was open-ended, and I worked with my lender, and he's like, you just let me know when you need the money about a week prior, and we'll make sure it's there. So it worked out really well. That's why when we had that one under contract, it was under contract for 110 days. And I know obviously
it's a long time for like a single family house.
And you're just waiting, It's like, well, we had a 70-day probate process, plus you get their stuff out. And it was just, I was like, I'm in no hurry. I'd love to get going on this one. I guess, I should have been in a little more of a hurry, but it was my first one. So I had that like hesitation of nervousness in there, even though I know I got a smoking deal on this place. Especially when I ordered the appraisal and it came in way higher. I'm like, all right, I think I'm good on this one.
It's too good to be true. So you're kind of nervous to get it locked up.
Yeah. And then
that's awesome.
But following up and making sure and reassuring everybody that's in the transaction, you do know what you're doing, because I did have enough people that surrounded me that had done this before. And that was what was important, gave me the confidence to move forward, because your first one is always going to be your most nervous wreck.
And I think some people may hear the story like, oh, hey, yeah, your mailman just let you know this property came to light. Like, oh, well, that seems very, very lucky. But I think the best way to define that is that you had already done the work to prepare yourself for when this opportunity came along. Because I'm sure everyone probably has 1,000 stories of, when that one opportunity kind of passed them by. But it's the people who've taken the time where you took the mentorship course, you went and networked with people, you got your lender lined up, so that as soon as you found that deal, you just had to pick up the phone, call your lender, hey, we got something ready to go, rock and roll.
Doing the legwork ahead of time really makes a big difference on your implementation and how fast you can act.
That's awesome. All right, so you go along, do a couple house flips over the course of a couple of years, go full-time in real estate. Then I know you started doing a couple Airbnbs as well. When did that come along, and how did that come about?
So when I left my job, I ended up getting my general contractor's license just to, I wanted to be more knowledgeable in the process to help out even my subs that might not know all the areas, or finding new contractors to do it. So it's like, if you're going to put in the time in your education, it's going to pay back. And it had. And so I got that in late 17, ended up buying a property in 17, ended up rehabbing it, needed a ton of work. Right. And we ended up finishing it. And it was in a flood zone, so you need flood insurance. But we had high waters that year. And there was a memorandum in place that no new flood policy would be written. So unless someone was going to pay cash for this $700,000-$800,000 house, I'm not going to close on it, because no mortgage company is going to close without flood insurance. So we had a loan on it. So we went to the bank and presented to our loan officer, which was the vice VP of lending. And then also we gave her kind of examples and cases to, like, hey, we're going to try doing this Airbnb thing. I know our loan is due, but could maybe do a construction loan and refinance it to a permanent loan. They call it a construction to perm. So, and that wasn't our intention. We wanted to sell this one. We had a lot of our own money into it. We wanted it out. I didn't want to refinance, pull cash out. I just wanted to sell this place. However, we knew it wasn't going to happen until water levels went down. We're like, maybe we'll Airbnb it for a little bit. So we spent about $20,000 in furnishing the place and getting it booked. And we didn't know, but it was the Final Four was hosted in Minneapolis that year. So as soon as we listed this place, the first 3 weeks in March, just book right up. We're like, our 3 weeks is going to cover 3 months worth of payments. Like, is this real? And, we priced it lower than we knew, but, we were new, so we needed to get bookings. And then after that, it was like booking. Then we filled up the summer, and it was like, wow, this works. We'll just see how winter's going to be now.
Worried about the winter.
So we ended up staying booked up year round, and we still do really well with that property.
And you still keep it?
Yeah.
It's like, well, why we throw it away at this point?
It's a cash cow.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
For a property located, within 25 minutes of my home residence, in case there's something that does go wrong. But I rarely stop up there. I probably stop up there maybe once a month. I have lawn and snow removal taken care of by one of my guys that works for me. And then I have a cleaner that is just a blessing that has been with us. She did leave for a little bit because we had bunk beds, and she's like, get rid of the bunk beds and I'll come back. So, and I got tired of climbing up there. Beds, and I was like, I'll figure this out. So we got rid of all the bunk beds and just made it really simple and easy to clean.
That's awesome.
So yeah, our cleaner has just been a blessing to us on that. And then we found out that we could make some great money in Airbnb. And, my wife spent so much time researching, watching these videos about Airbnbs. So she's like, well, I want to do this. And so we started buying a few more, and then COVID hit. And then it was like, now we had 3 months worth of booking. It was like, bloop, 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 and all the bookings were canceling because Airbnb was just giving everybody their money back. I think we had over $70,000 in canceled bookings within a 2-week timeline. We as far out as could be, because travel was restricted and everything. We're like, well, what are we going to do? And then a month later, the bookings started coming back. People were wanting to get away in their own state, and they wanted to drive here and get their family together in a spread out area. Bigger building. So it worked out really well.
So there's kind of a big footprint building.
Yeah, it's like 5,000 square feet.
And how many people does it sleep?
It sleeps 19.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
So, and I mean, it's got a game room, air hockey, foosball, and
you got the foosball table, or the air hockey table keeps you social distance.
Yeah, there it keeps you, you're over your 6 foot, right? No, yeah, but it was funny, because then we had some people that were actually house hunting, and they didn't want to commute, so they could work remote, and they stayed there for 3 weeks looking at houses. And it's just amazing how all walks of life come up to be. And here's another thing. It's kind of morbid, but we ended up getting a lot of families gathering for funerals. So they'd have the funeral, but the family needed a place to gather afterwards, and they couldn't do it in a public space. And so we ended up getting a lot of bookings for funerals, and we still do to this day. And they're our last minute weekday bookings that we get if they're not filled up. So those awesome. in the fall and winter are the common bookings, because we always try to figure out why they're bringing it down. And mostly it's family gatherings, concerts, girls' weekend, guys' weekend, bachelor parties, bachelorette parties. Just knowing where it's coming from, you can help advertise towards it. But through VRBO and Airbnb, all the advertisement seems to be pretty done well there.
And I think it's really cool with this is that, so you got into Airbnbs by accident because you had a flip that you couldn't sell. And then you, instead of just sitting there and be like, well, I guess we're screwed.
Yeah.
You kind of pivoted. You're able to figure out this other method in order to start cash flowing, and then it turned out to be even better than what you had been doing previously.
It started a new business model for us. That's why I say adapt or die in an ever-changing market. We're never, COVID was times that nobody ever expected to see anything. So in that time, we had to figure out what we were going to do too. Yeah. And it's like, well, let's just change up how everything's done. And actually ended up buying a 6-unit apartment during COVID. Oh. It's a great project for me and my crew to work on during the COVID years. And we ended up buying a place for $120,000, put about $450,000 into it. Awesome. And refied, and the place was worth a bunch of money now. And we have 3 short-term rentals in that, and we have 3 long-term rentals as well.
In the 6-unit.
In the 6-unit.
There you go. I know. So I love it.
Yeah, and it's in a high destination area as well. Usually close to, I'd say lakes, rivers, ski hills. They're usually pretty good.
That's awesome. Yeah, being able to find a property around those amenities as well definitely helps, especially with the short-term rental.
Yes.
To have a reason for someone to want to come stay there.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the key.
And I can tell you, if people are interested in getting into Airbnbs, but then I say is you buy where you're wanted. Don't go to neighborhoods or cities where they're already trying to shut it down.
Yep.
Go where you're wanted and find destination areas. I think you're going to be much better off.
Awesome. And so after, or after/during the Airbnb thing, I know you've ended up buying a couple of these small motels.
Yes.
Which I knew you have development plans for them, but yes. How do those come about? And I know you want to do the development stuff. Have you done those development projects before, or how did that come about, and what point in this process?
Okay, so how I got into motel was actually business partners that we have on other properties had an issue with one of their investors that they had, and he was supposed to raise the funds for everything, and they brought it to me. And I'm not a syndication type guy. I've never done it, never dived into it. I have too many other things going on to learn it. If I wanted to partner with someone on a syndication, I would hire someone to do that for me. It's not another thing I need to learn right now. Nope. And I know it's not that complicated. I just don't want to go through all of that.
You got a lot of
there's a lot of stuff going on.
It's a good idea.
So with that, he had brought it to me, and I was like, well, let's call around all the local banks and see if they're interested in lending, because it was out towards Milwaukee, in a really nice area in the outskirts of Milwaukee. Yep. So we found a bank we called 3 of them. 2 of them got back to us, and one was just aggressive with it. It was awesome. 80%, so we had to bring 20% down on this purchase of the motel. It was turnkey ready. And it was already geared towards keeping them as like apartment efficiency, weekly rentals only, not monthly. There's no tenant rights on it. We still have our motel license and everything. Operate that as well.
Extended stay.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And so we found out that those worked really well. The only reason I wanted it was to tear it down and build a multifamily or townhouses or whatever, because it was already zoned medium density. Already had a retention pond that was big enough for all of it. It was a perfect scenario just to tear down, and the price wasn't even that bad. However, we found that it ended up making a lot of money compared to what we paid for it. It makes quite a bit of money. And so we're like, well, we'll just sit on it until a developer comes along, or in a few years, we'll, tear it down and build something new. Well, that opened up a new business opportunity where we ended up just purchasing 2 more this year. So we like the business model. It works really well. We have a live-in manager that handles everything. We bought her own car for the businesses.
Very cool.
She drives around, collects all the money for us, and takes care of it. I'm actually running a rehab on one of the houses we have on the motel lots. Yep. And we're adding 2 more units. And I mean, it's been a pretty smooth sailing. There's little hiccups here and there, and the other ones, we have almost 6 acres of developable land in the one that we bought in January. And then we have another one that has a little over 3 acres. It's so they're in areas that can be developed, or they can be sold as mom and pop motels. If I can tell you what, if I was younger and I wanted to move out to Wisconsin, there's one I have that's overlooking Lake Michigan, and I would just be an operator there. There's enough money you would get a job anywhere. You don't have to pay rent or anything. So I'm always looking for little motels like that. And they could be in Minnesota, it'd be Wisconsin, anywhere. Now that we have systems figured out how to operate.
That's awesome.
So
I think one of the common things, because you're doing all sorts of you're getting your hands in all sorts of different baskets. But I feel like one of the common things I see you do all the time is you have this amazing ability to talk to sellers and to negotiate and being able to find deals that work. What do you think is kind of one of the keys? Because I know people have even brought you into deals just to help because you can negotiate.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the key behind a superpower like that, and also in order to negotiate with sellers and finding that equal ground?
Listening and education. You have to listen to see what they're actually asking, because everybody's like, oh, I just want cash. But if they're properly educated on it, and I'm educated on their situation by listening to them, I now know what they actually really need. Not so much as what they want; it's what they need, and I tell them to talk to an accountant and make sure this is a fit for them, or talk to an attorney. And we've gone from sellers that just wanted to cash out, and they said, well, I'm glad I met you, and I'm glad you gave me these 3 options, because I'll give them options. But educating them and showing them that there is more than just collecting cash because of capital gains, especially in these commercial deals or these ones that are not owner occupied. So it's really hard, I mean, it all depends on what they want. But owner occupied deals and seller financing can be tough because if they're going to be avoiding a lot of capital gains if they just sell it outright, rather than if they move out and then all of a sudden they sell it a couple of years later. Now they have to pay the capital gains on it. So these motels are perfect scenarios, and I'm looking for basically owners that are tired and they just want to be done. And it's like, well, do you want one big check, or do you want consistent cash flow like you've been getting over the years with these motels that you don't owe anything on anymore, and now it's no longer your headaches, no nothing, and you're still getting money every month, and it ends up working out pretty well.
That sounds like a great retirement fund for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And so there's times where he's like, well, I'd like a 5-year balloon on it, I'd like to be paid off. And then even after we close, he's like, if you want an extension, I could
let me know.
renegotiate. He's like, we could extend out to 10 years too. And he's like, but please tell me if you're going to be paying it off. Like, he doesn't want it paid off earlier. And then at that point, if I want to pay it off because I'm doing something else, I can also renegotiate the interest rate too.
Awesome.
And especially with banks and having to come up, with 20, 30, maybe 35% down sometimes on these non-owner occupied deals that are in the commercial portfolio, the banks sometimes don't want to lend on, or they do, or they're going to be low loan to value. Where I was able to get 10% down on a contract for deed for 5 years, amortized over 30. So I mean, my monthly payments are nothing. And if I'm planning on tearing these places down, I want as much so I can bank as much cash flow as possible. And so I'd say, I did learn to negotiate seller financing because it's the quickest way to get as much property as possible without having to go to a bank.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's the best opportunity because it's just you and the seller. So the two sides of this one transaction, rather than having some intermediaries, which are great in certain deals, but on other deals, you know what? This is a unique enough opportunity where I think it'd be best if we just figure something out, just the two of us.
Absolutely. And then after we agree on something, then I was like, make sure you run this by someone else,
awesome.
And I prefer to be an accountant or attorney. I don't necessarily want a real estate agent. Not saying anything's wrong with them. It's just they're looking, where's my commission? And it's not that if a real estate agent brings me a deal, I'm definitely going to make sure they get paid. It was like, these are off market.
Of course.
I'm finding these through word of mouth, or by a partner bringing them to me. So that's the thing is, real estate agents are good. They're great in a lot of transactions, but in the off-market ones, or if they don't understand the concept of what I'm trying to say, I asked them. I did have an on-market property that I said, hey, I would like to present the offer to the seller with you present, but me directly, and do know that I'm not represented. You'll get paid your commission, whatever you have negotiated with them. However, I don't know if you can explain this exactly as I'd like to. And I go, in doing so, now you're going to learn what I'm explaining. You're going to be able to take that knowledge and help out a future client. And that's the thing is, it's the education and understanding what everybody needs.
That's awesome.
And so I have done that before, and he was young and he was very happy that he's like, I didn't want to have to present it. And these people did not want seller financing. And we ended up convincing him to do it.
So, you know what they want more than they do. Yeah, exactly. But again, it's you're understanding, you're seeing what their needs are, and then you're able to present an offer, even if they didn't think it was possible, because they may have some sort of preconceived notion on what seller financing means, whether it's like, well, you just have no money or whatever the thought process is, but you're able to present it in a way that it shows that it fits all the needs that they have, which is awesome. And then it's cool where you're also presenting it to the broker letting it as an opportunity for them to learn how to then maybe in future deals being able to present this in the same way.
Absolutely.
So they can get other deals closed. Because I think seller financing in a lot of different markets can help close deals that are just completely unclosable.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes those listings that have been on the market for 6 months are the best opportunity for seller finance because they've tried the traditional way and it didn't work out for them.
Yep. Well, there's times where I've negotiated the 10% down and 0% interest.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, why would anybody want 0% interest? I'm like, well, he's already going to be paying on the gains on the money he's collecting monthly, but now he's just going to be paying taxes on this little bit of interest he's making too. Yeah. And realistically, he just wants the property gone. And I'm able to pay just a little bit more for that property over time instead of paying it the interest and then him making payments on his interest, getting taxed on his interest. So, so I always like to have different options for everyone. So
I love it. I love it. So, and recently then, I think this happened this year, you've now stepped into business ownership outside of just real estate with the liquor store and the smoke shops.
Yes.
So you've been doing real estate this whole time. You've been killing it. What made you then jump outside of real estate going into business? Because there wasn't any business, real estate attached to these businesses when you started them.
However, our intention will be different coming up.
Yes, you negotiated with the seller when you're doing your lease.
Absolutely.
I love it. So how did this opportunity come about? And then what stuck out about starting a business that kind of was appealing to you versus just buying another rental property?
Yeah, so I actually I bought a few properties off auction.com or Zome and everything. I ended up acquiring a farm that through auction. And I ended up junking it out. I was going to keep it as a wedding venue. And I was like, that's a lot of work and everything. So I ended up selling it. Well, I listed it. We were having issues with the septic. And then it just fell apart because there was a disconnect with the appraisal, the agent, and the agent told me that the owner wanted it, said it was their dream house. It's right in the area where they wanted it to be and everything. So after this appraisal came through, they sent over a cancellation. Not even a thing that I could correct it or anything. Just a cancellation.
We're done.
So we can't lend on this property. And I'm like, I call the agent. I'm like, listen, can I speak to the seller directly? I'm not going to cut you out, but if you say that he wants this property and you just sent over a cancellation, which I'm not signing until you let me talk to your client. And he did. And I spoke to that client and I says, hey, look, what do you do for a living? Start talking, tell him what I do. And then I'm like, how about you he had a construction company. I'm like, how about you bring 2-3 guys? I'll bring 2-3 guys. Let's go knock out everything on this appraisal issues. And it was just small stuff. We had it done in a day and a half. The deal closed 10 days later. And it was like, okay, but if I didn't reach out over and above, I would have never closed this transaction. And all of a sudden, 6 months later, after I sell the house, sometimes you don't want to answer a phone call when a buyer, 6 months later, like, what's wrong with this? I didn't live there. I don't know anything about this house. But I picked up the phone and answered. And I said, hey, how's everything going? He's like, great. He's like, actually, the reason I'm calling is, it was great doing business with you, just getting this deal done. And this is what I do for business now. A lot's changed. So I want to talk to you and see if you had time to sit down and talk. So now someone I sold some real estate to now is wanting to do business with me. And that's what I say is you don't burn a bridge. You try to figure something out moving forward. And if I didn't do that, I'd never be where I am today with it. Yeah.
So this guy had opened these stores previously.
He had 2 smoke shops going already.
Awesome.
And so he's like, they're lucrative and this is the business we're in. So him and another guy, and then I became their third partner. And my job was to go out and find new locations and get this stuff set up to go. And I mean, that meeting happened in August. And then September, we had another meeting and we signed a lease at a great location. And October 13th, we were in operation.
2 months.
Yep. From time we met to the time we had a place up and open.
When you say met, that was when you guys
sat down and spoke.
You had sat down and spoke. And this was after they had bought the property.
So it's probably about, it would have been 8 months after he had purchased the property.
But you had a great relationship with the seller. You solved the problem that the seller had, the buyer had. Yep. Sorry. You solved the problem this buyer had, and were able to do it in such a great way that later on, when they thought, hey, I need another partner for this, who I should reach out to? That guy I just bought this place from.
And he had been looking for someone else to.
Yep.
And yeah, so it was just kind of a turn of event, and they had been running these smoke shops successfully, and then we had this walk-in cooler, and we're like, man, if we, the smoke shops take off, then we could probably open a liquor store, and there was such a demand for it in this area. It's located down by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. You cannot get to the casino without passing it. So we just had a big concert weekend. We got a big concert weekend down there next weekend.
Love it. Get stocked up.
Yeah, so we load up on everything, and it ends up working out really well. And so we ended up opening the liquor store officially in August 12th this year, or April 12th of this year. So we have started applying for all our license, permitting, background. It's very extensive to get a liquor license like that. And then we ended up opening up. And I guess the rest is history. It's still going great.
That's awesome.
So those are very remote or hands off for me. Yeah. I stop in once a week just because it's on the way to my boat. So it's like, all right, this is good. Just take some inventory every Monday or whatever.
Yep. If you got to pick up a case of beer, you might as well do it.
Right. Well, might as well buy from yourself.
Yeah,
so,
I love it.
Yeah, it worked out really well, and I do plan to expand a little bit more on that. Okay. But it's not like I want to have 20 of them. I mean, if it worked out, it worked out, and we did start them both from scratch.
Yeah. And so the benefit you had from this, you started it from scratch, but then you had found someone who did this before. And so you have an operator that you're partnering with that has kind of the working knowledge of how to do this already, which is fantastic. But with that in mind, what are some of the differences this business model has versus an Airbnb or a rental?
So this one actually does a little more employees hands-on. Someone has to show up. Someone has to. There's a larger amount of inventory that's needed in something like this. But once you get all the systems in place, it's completely hands-off.
I love it.
If you choose it to be. Awesome. You can work in this business as much as you want. I can go down there and run the till and sell if I want. Yep. I think I'm up to like $76 in sales just because while I was doing the build-out, people were there, and I was like, well, I can ring you up. So, I mean, I haven't done much, but I mean, I did the build out and everything, but making sure the inventory and products ordered. I'm training the employee there to let me know what he's hearing that everybody wants, and what does it look like for inventory. Awesome. I think the only reason I stopped there is because I want to. Yep. But I mean, that's also goes back to having great business partners.
Awesome.
And I do have great business partners in real estate and in actual businesses too. So, and we did take our, their seller financing negotiations and actually purchased another smoke shop.
There you go.
A contract for deed.
So you purchased not the shop, but the building.
The business. We bought the business on a contract.
Oh, interesting. Very cool.
Yeah, it was not a contract for deed, but it was a contract to purchase. It was very similar. Yeah. Assumed the lease.
Awesome.
This person wanted to get out of the state, and he had a lease he couldn't get out of, and we're like, well, it's a location we're interested in. So
there you go.
We found that lead off Facebook. So
using the creative finance, all that sort of stuff, those strategies. But I think, again, it's in any opportunity where you can just sit down with the seller or have the two parties sit down together and hear it out, understand what each other needs, and being able to just find the best solution that works for the both of you. I think in any situation like that, you're going to win if you're able to listen and hear the needs of the other party.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And then I think the last thing we can chat about is the Minnesota Real Estate Club.
Yeah.
Which I think that this has been a part of your journey from the very beginning, because I think we've talked a lot, and a lot of the story you have, it's, you've been introduced, whether it's off market or you had a friend of a friend, but this all came from you consistently attending all these networking events.
Yeah.
So how do you first get plugged into the Minnesota Real Estate Club, and then what led to you, taking it over and starting to host it now?
Yeah. So basically how that started, I started attending it, and I was going to all these other ones, and started, my kids started getting older. I didn't want to be away from them every single, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, going to these networking meetings, and I'd have to pick and choose the one I'd want to go to. So where I was told in my mentorship program and package was like, either start one of your networking group or take over one. And I found that my roots I planted my roots and everything right in the real estate club, because it was like-minded individuals that I enjoyed being around. It was something every single month, that was the one I wanted to go to. So I was approached by the person that started that club and says, hey, I'm looking at getting out because my kids are growing old and I'm coaching them and I can't attend this every month. So I didn't want to go to them every single night. I wanted to have one I could grow with. And that's where I got into it, and I didn't want to have the biggest club. I just want to have the best people around it, and it'll make it so much more fun.
Yeah.
I can tell you, more people are going to network when it's a fun environment versus a very stale, dry hotel-based setting or banquet room or something where
everyone's
someone's
in
just
suits and tie,
and someone's trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
The only thing I sell is a membership every single year, and that gets you your free food, free drinks, and ticket events to anything that we had.
I love it.
And obviously we just had our boat cruise last week,
Loved
which
it.
was just a blast.
Such a great
Margaritas
event.
on the Mississippi. We do have next month coming up at Canterbury Downs.
There you go.
It'll be September 12th.
There you go.
I think the gates open or doors open at 4, so I'm going to be there a little early and hang out. We rented out the silk section, just have 100 some people out and enjoy. We got a live band for after the horse racing, and
really, there you go. That's awesome, man.
Come hang out and have a good time. So.
I love it. Yeah, I've been attending that group on and off for about 2 years now. I think I've been a member for about 2 years as well. Which, I love that event because it's a very casual environment. A lot of the people who attend this group are active, and there's just this great communal nature to it. Because I think a lot of people have this opinion of, say, when they think about real estate investors, they think of these snobby individuals, and that's never been my experience. So the real estate investors that I've met, especially at MinRec, are some of the most kind, genuine people I've ever met, and they are always willing to lend a hand, whether it's just giving you the name of a contractor and introducing yourself to a broker, and sometimes even giving you a listing.
Yeah,
which is really, really cool.
Absolutely, and that's where it's putting the right people in the right room. And that's more what I was looking to do, rather than trying to get as many butts in the seats to sell them something they don't need or make money off memberships. I don't make money off that club. I just like putting the right people in the right room.
That's all.
And it's various networking, education. You get a lot of local experts. It's not stuff that you were doing nationwide. It's right here. Most people are focusing their investment right here.
That's why it's the Minnesota Real Estate Club.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just any real estate club. So for someone who's looking at, they're getting started in real estate and they're wanting to start attending these events, how can they maximize that ROI of when they're going into these rooms and trying to meet people?
Well, I tell you, don't be bashful. Make sure you show up. Don't just grab a card. Pull out your phone, get that person's phone number, and then as soon as I give it to you, text them your information, not just your first name and last name and then your email and your phone number, a list of what you do and what you're looking for. Because that's going to go so much further, because now the next time you text that person, whether they entered your contact info into your phone or not, they're going to see that message that you sent them and you took time to follow up with them where no one else did. You give them their card or your card and they're just going to go throw it on their desk. No. Some people are good about following up, and I can tell you 70% probably aren't. So the thing is just follow up right in that moment. It doesn't take much longer with the technology we have and these new phones that you can just enter everything and go, because these business cards are kind of the way of the past, and I feel that they don't perform like an actual taking action.
Well, it's a genuine connection. People they don't want to do business with people with business cards or just an entity. They want to do business with people, and so being able just to sit and connect with them, which is why Minnesota Real Estate Club is great, where you just have a drink, have a couple of wings, sit down, you hang out, and you make a genuine connection with one another.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and you find what other people are doing too. So it's like, hey, I've always wanted to get into Airbnbs. I've always wanted to get into land development. I've always wanted to get into whatever, tobacco, liquor store. It's like, if you don't share what you're doing, how's anybody going to know what you do?
Yeah, you have to put it out there. And so people can't help you, and people won't be able to help you if they don't know.
Absolutely.
And so that's why it's important to show up. That's why it's important to be consistent. That's why it's important to follow up.
And that's why I don't sell monthly memberships. Like, how much is it monthly? It's like, no, I want you to pay for a whole year. So that way you feel obligated to come here. But also, I want you to be here too. And that's half the people, is everybody that's a member usually shows up or they have some sort of obligation. Our attendance for members is great. And first meeting's always free. So I'd suggest people to come on out.
Awesome.
Check it out. See if it's a fit for you. However, Canterbury Downs is not free. The first meeting is not free for your first meeting.
Yes.
But October, come on out and attend that. Make sure you like it. However, I tell people, it's pretty inexpensive for the people you'll meet. For as far as coming out to Canterbury Downs too. So.
Yeah, the partners I am currently partnered with on the hotel, I met through Minnesota Real Estate Club.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. That's great to know.
It was great because, we had met a year prior and then hadn't seen each other a couple times. And then later on, because we had connected, I had expressed, hey, I'm doing syndications, I'm raising capital. And then they had a deal that they thought was great. Then they brought it to me and said, hey, you want to do this together? Mm-hmm. But it was because we had met at Minnesota Real Estate Club.
That's awesome. I love hearing stories like that.
Love it.
There are a lot of them out there.
Yeah, there are. So just to wrap up, what is some great advice you would give to real estate investors or someone who's looking to get started and on a similar path like you?
I would say figure out what you want to do first, and then tell people that you are trying to do that. Then they're going to connect you with people that they already know doing that. I have a great Rolodex. It's like, come out and network. I could probably find someone that is an expert in that arena if I don't already know them, just through my network. And it's like, community is the new currency. So now the more people you have in your corner, the more money you're going to end up being able to make. I'd say don't be shy. Know what you want, but don't be dead set that's the only thing you're going to do. Make flexible. Sure you can be flexible. You can adapt. You can change. I wanted to get into flipping houses with multifamily as my end goal all the way. Well, I've flipped houses. I got multifamily along the way, and I'm still working on more multifamily. Then I got into commercial, so we own pretty large commercial building too, and it's now we own a couple different businesses, and it's like, if it makes sense and you can make money doing it, and you actually enjoy doing it, then by all means, go ahead and take that opportunity. Yeah. And if somebody does offer you an opportunity like that, make sure you don't waste their time. Yeah.
Be sincere, take it seriously.
Absolutely. It's not just showing up and having a meeting and never doing anything about that meeting again.
I think when I first got started, I had an idea of the path I wanted to go on. So I think when I first wrote down my goals, it was over the course of 10 years, I went at 35 units. And now we have like 85, but it was over 10 years. I went at 35 units, but then as I started learning, it suddenly, my perspective of what was possible kept on opening up. Yep. And then that's when I started pivoting and continued to make new plans. But when you're just starting, this much. How could you possibly think that you can track out the next 10 years without being open to, like, when those changes come, just pivoting a little bit?
Absolutely. And it's having goals in mind, but not being afraid to adapt and change those goals too. Just because you had that when you were uninformed, and now you're a little more educated and have more pathways in front of you, don't be afraid to take a new one.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, Anthony, thank you for coming out.
Thank you very much. On the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And for anyone who wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Just reach out on Facebook or message me. You have my contact info. My phone number is 651-983-4625. And you can text me, call me. I'm an open book. And there's a million different things that I know that I'd love to share, because as a podcast is, Million Ways to Millions. I love it.
I love it. All right. Thank you, man.
So, thank you.
Thank you for watching the Million Ways to Millions podcast. I hope this episode helped offer some encouragement to you on your own path to building wealth, retirement, and financial stability. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing on your podcast platform of choice. If you want to watch the video version, check it out on my YouTube channel, Micah Hayworth. If you want to see more, follow me on Instagram at Micah Hayworth or Twitter @House Hayworth. Thanks for watching.